The Capital Confidential Podcast is brought to you by the Times-Union, the leading newspaper in New York's capital region. Subscribe today or visit online at timesunion.com.
I found out I've been pronouncing Max's last name wrong all these years.
Oh yeah? How do you pronounce it?
I went with open.
Open?
You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
How do we beat him in an election?
We will. I'm going to run against him.
I wish you would. I wish you would, Dad. I would.
There are things in here that are unobjectionable because they're not that effective. So yeah, sure, I'll vote for a distinctive license plate. Sure, why not?
Jim, you had your press conference at 4 o'clock.
You're having a press conference now?
That's
You're
right.
talking?
I'm having a press conference.
Well,
now.
is this your space here or is it public?
No, it's my space.
Oh, this is your
Don't
space.
interrupt.
Okay.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is the Capital Confidential Podcast. We're going green this episode, metaphorically speaking at least. The podcast runs solely on oil. For a conversation with environmental advocates of New York Executive Director Peter Iwanowicz, I spoke with him at their Hamilton Street headquarters about initiatives in and out of the governor's budget that are designed to tackle climate change. We began by examining Cuomo's embrace of the quote-unquote Green New Deal in his January budget address and his goal of 100% clean power for the state by 2040. Enjoy the show.
Well, the way we look at things at environmental advocates is what's been going on within climate change over the last several years in terms of legislation. So it's an interesting development for the governor. For the first time, he's had 2 terms to actually put forward legislation which would put into law his climate and clean energy goals, and for the first 8 years of his tenure, he didn't do anything like that.
There was no rhetoric or anything, at least?
Oh, lots of rhetoric.
But you're saying nothing in statute?
This is the first time he's actually put forward legislative language that would codify what New York State has for climate goals and clean energy goals.
Because I feel like we've had a lot of like 2020s, 2030s, all this stuff. What's that? Where's that stuff coming from and going? Is that just...
Listen, Governor Cuomo was famous for sort of putting out big rhetorical statements about different things and different standards and different goals, whether they're big, high-level climate goals or whether they're smaller goals like number of electric vehicle charging stations. Let's use that last one as a clear example. Several years ago, he said, we're going to have 3,000 electric charging stations set up by 2018.
Okay.
Well, we got to 2018 and we called up and said, how'd you do? Our count was about 1,800. Oh,
Slightly
when
lower.
we said 2018, we meant the end of 2018.
And did they get there?
No,
Oh.
They didn't even get there. But at the beginning of 2018, they set a new goal. So we had a 3,000 charger goal for 2018. They didn't get there. They missed it almost by half. So instead of sort of saying we failed, they issued a new goal of 10,000 charging stations by 2025. So we've seen a lot of this sort of rhetoric not matching reality as it relates to clean energy and climate from the Cuomo administration.
How about committing to phasing out coal power by 2020? Are we in good shape for that one for next year?
There was a draft regulations, comments were taken, but again, this is an announcement he made in 2016. We have not seen that final reg put into place. We think it'll happen, but that's another example where great rhetoric has not matched the reality of regulatory changes, and we're set to do that phase out by 2020, which
At the
is
start of
about 8 months
2020
away.
or the end of 2020?
Well, you and I would think, based on his statements, that it would be the start. Maybe they want to give themselves an extra 12 months.
Yeah.
But again, it's what we've seen in the first 2 terms of the Cuomo administration, a lot of big promises, a lot of rhetoric, but what hasn't gone forward is the reality of the amount of clean energy in the electricity sector, and any concerted effort on other sectors of the economy related to climate change. So transportation, buildings, industry, none of that stuff has really progressed under this administration.
So what is the governor now proposing to codify, and why should we care?
So what he's put forward is a couple of different things in his budget bill that would put into place climate and clean energy standards, but it's entirely related to the electricity sector. He has said, let's ensure that 70% of our electricity is generated from renewable energy sources by 2030. That's great. The state has had a commitment outside of law, done administratively, for 50% by 2030, so he's improving upon that commitment. Mm-hmm. What we'd like to see is more benchmarking along the way, so we don't wake up in 2029 and say, oops, we're still at 5%, which is where we are now in terms of new renewables under the Cuomo administration. So we have a long way to go to get to the 50%, and the governor is now proposing to take that to 70% That's just in the electricity sector.
Okay.
What he would like to do is get carbon pollution entirely out of the electricity sector by 2040. That's his 100% goal by 2040.
That's the clean power.
Exactly. But again, it's just the electricity system. We're not talking about motor vehicles, buildings, residences, everything else. And just to give you a comparison here, the electricity sector is about 17% of our overall greenhouse gas emissions. So we've got 83% of greenhouse gas emissions coming from other sectors that the administration has no game plan on and no commitment in this bill to tackle.
So is this goal, though, is this doable? I mean, you talked about we need benchmarks so we can be cognizant of how the progress is coming along, but, realistically, is this something that we can do? Is it akin to, JFK, or is it akin to JFK at the start of the decade saying, we'll get man on the moon by the end of the decade?
Yeah, for the electricity sector, absolutely doable. There's a number of different proposals in the pipeline for wind energy. A lot can be accomplished on solar. There's a huge amount of energy efficiency and weatherizations of people's homes that can drop their electricity consumption down tremendously. So we don't need the proverbial moonshot to get to the electricity sector goal. We are going to need that proverbial moonshot, however, to get into the other sectors of the economy, which is why our organization prefers setting out a benchmark of getting to 100% off of fossil fuels by 2050, giving the economy of New York 30 years' time for a lot of innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, and a turnover of the entire vehicle fleet.
So before we think about that world, tell me what the would look like to have, the whole electricity system using clean power. I mean, is this going to be costly? Is it going to radically affect my day-to-day life if I'm a New Yorker? How will it manifest itself?
It's not going to radically affect your day-to-day life,
okay,
because you're still going to be consuming electricity. The electrons are just going to come from sources that are 100% clean, things like solar and wind, which, these technologies exist now. They're being installed now, and they're being improved upon now. So we're not going to see the need for huge amounts of new inventions in this space. It's just rapid deployment and greater political will. I'm going to use my personal circumstances as an example on this one. Several years ago, I went through a home energy audit, and a bunch of different things were pointed out to myself and my wife and my family of things that we could do to reduce our energy consumption. Better insulation, sealing of air leaks around the windows and door frames, etc., switching over electric hot water heater to gas. We did a lot of incremental things that cut our energy consumption, especially in the electricity side, by 1/3, month after month after we did these switches. So once we started to get into a more energy efficient household, then we made the decision that we wanted to generate electricity with solar. So we installed solar panels on our roof about 18 months ago, and we now generate more than 100% of our annual electricity needs with a solar panel on our home's rooftop.
What kind of investment, though, did you have to make as you made that transition? Though? What kind of upfront costs were there for you as a homeowner?
The upfront costs were big, but there were a lot of state and federal tax incentives and grants available from NYSERDA through all these clean energy funds that really whittled down the upfront cost by more than half. And we are now expecting a payback on that system in about 7 or 8 years.
Is there enough support out there for the ordinary New York citizen to make that transition, you think?
We think so. There's a lot of dollars available that are sitting on a table unspent. New York State is collecting money right now on everybody's power bills, and it's sitting there, and it's not being deployed in a very active manner to help people become more energy efficient. We were smart enough to do the energy audit, and then we sort of tapped into other programs through our utilities to really draw down the initial cost of some of these investments. And there's a lot of money sitting on the table that more New Yorkers can tap into to cut their energy bills too.
How do I get an energy audit?
Through NYSERDA. NYSERDA
Just
runs these programs.
Call them
on
up
their website. You can look on their website looking for energy efficiency or help for homeowners. And then they have a bunch of different numbers you can call depending on where you are in the state to have somebody come to your home. Or your business and run you through an audit. There's a modest cost, and it's a sort of a graduating scale based on your income needs.
Okay.
But it's a great way to sort of diagnose opportunities for you to cut your energy bills.
So you mentioned some of the clean energy sources such as solar and wind. I don't think I heard you mention nuclear. Is that a clean energy source in your perspective?
Well, if you're looking at it from a purely climate change perspective, you're not combusting things at a nuclear facility, so you don't have that carbon dioxide footprint. But let's not try to think that nuclear energy is not dangerous and it is dirty. I mean, you have this
How does the governor treat
waste
it?
problem. So in the governor's proposal, he is looking at that as a source of electricity that is free of carbon pollution. So he would, use the nuclear power that's generated to meet his carbon neutrality standard.
Is that a problem?
I think in the long term, yes. In the short term, we have facilities that are up and running, generating electrons today that'll be here under their licensing. And as those licenses expire, they should be retired and phased out. But we shouldn't be thinking about solving our climate problem based on a dirty and old dangerous technology, because you still have this enormous legacy of waste at the back end.
So you view it as kind of a bridge sort of energy source then?
Well, I'm not sure if it's a bridge. It's the fact that these plants are here now and we have to phase them out over time.
Gotcha.
We should be moving rapidly off of fossil, and as we're doing that, we should be deploying huge amounts of renewable electricity like wind and solar. There's going to be a need for energy storage and batteries. And we should be doing a tremendous amount in terms of reducing our electricity consumption through energy efficiency and weatherization. The goal here really is to sip energy rather than gulp it. Right now we're gulping energy, so we need these massive plants. We need a lot of centralized power facilities. If we become more energy efficient, and remember my home example, we cut our electricity consumption by a third through minor steps around the home, month after month. If everybody in New York State could do that, we wouldn't need these tremendously large facilities. We could do it with more small wind, distributed solar, and with the advent of battery technology, we can store electrons in our own basements now.
What else regarding climate change was written into the budget? Anything else at all?
There wasn't a lot other than the governor proposing a climate action council, which is kind of weird because one actually exists right now. He inherited, when he came into office in 2011, he inherited two things. One was a climate action council that existed by an executive order that Governor Patterson signed in 2009. That executive order still exists. So he actually has a, quote, climate council that exists. He's never made available use of it and never convened it. He also inherited a climate action plan. There was a draft plan that council had worked on through all of 2009 and 10. And sitting on his desk when he walked into office in 2011 was a draft of that plan of how to get from where we were at that point in time, 2010, to 2050, to reduce emissions. So the playbook was sort of there. It was just ignored for the first 8 years. Now the governor is saying the legislature is different. It looks like they want to legislate on this stuff. I'm going to throw some ideas into the mix to see if any of it sticks.
And is there a timetable for this council? Do they need to have a report out anytime soon?
Well, there's different proposals, for the governor's sort of council, which, it's hard to sort of say this is going to be the timetable because it's just a proposal. The legislature also has, in their eyes, their vision of what climate policy should look like. They have their version of a council. They have their version of goals and standards, which are more expansive than the governor's. That's called the Climate and Community Protection Act, and something that we are really strongly supporting at Environmental Advocates through not only our direct work, but through a broad-based coalition called NY Renews.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the legislature because that's, you talk about the last 8 years of the governor's administration, and one of the big change from those past 8 years now is that he's got a completely Democratic legislature. And I'm wondering how you think that's going to affect what sort of climate policy we see from New York State, and have we already seen indicators of where this is heading?
I think we definitely have seen indicators, and I think the biggest change is now we have a state senate that wants to address climate change, that wants to legislate on this issue, and wants to do it in a bipartisan way. And we haven't seen that over the last 5 years in the New York State Senate. What we've seen is it's being led by people who are literally denying the existence of climate change. So
is that not a good way to do things?
No, it's not. I mean, taking problems on headlong and not ignoring them with your head buried in the sand is sort of a way to address it.
Okay.
While addressing climate change is definitely going to be a challenge, and moving New York's economy off of fossil fuels is going to be a challenge, it's going to be an enormous opportunity as well. Think of the number of jobs that will be created as we weatherize all these residences that are in New York, as people become more energy efficient and contract with employees to install more efficient appliances, different heating and cooling systems. All that is stuff that's going to be created here, so it's a huge opportunity. So the Senate in the past, it was led by climate deniers. The legislation that's before the legislature right now actually has existed for the last 3 years. The Assembly has passed it with a broad and bipartisan vote. There were actually a majority of senators last year in 2018 that had signed on to the bill as co-sponsors, Democrats and Republicans.
Just never moved.
Yeah, it never moved. Leadership just blocked it, thwarted any progress. So the biggest change is now we have a state Senate that wants to legislate, that wants to act on climate.
And was that plan, the CCPA, go further than things that the governor is talking about?
It does in several key areas. One, it has a bigger, bolder, broader climate action council that involves stakeholders appointed by the legislature as well as representatives from disadvantaged communities, so low-income communities of color would have a say at the table. It also requires that New York State spend 40% of the money that's being collected on our energy bills to go to low-income communities so that those who are the smallest contributor to the climate crisis, but on the receiving end of all the impacts, particularly with extreme weather events, they would get funds to help weatherize their homes, become more efficient, and to deploy renewables. It would also have important out-year goals. Leading states in this country that are known as climate leaders, California and Massachusetts in particular, they set long-term visionary goals in law. In California, they did it in 2006. Massachusetts, it was 2008. And they committed to reorient their government decision-making to meet those goals. So they have mid-century goals to completely move their economies in California and Massachusetts off of fossil fuels. And what they've been doing systematically for the last decade or so is reorienting a lot of their government decisions to meet those goals. So they don't have the schizophrenic sort of nature of, we'll approve this fossil fuel pipeline project over here, but then we have these climate goals over here. That's the way New York has been for the last 8 years under Cuomo.
Is there any reason to expect that maybe the CCPA could get done by June when the legislative session ends, or is this more of a longer-term bill?
No, I think this is a bill that's going to get dealt with this year. I mean, it's nice that the governor has evolved as a position from ignoring the legislative process to putting some cards on the table for the first time. The state Senate majority leader has urged her conference to do hearings on the CCPA. Their focus point in the Senate is to look at the CCPA. They kind of looked at what the governor proposed, heard the commissioner during the budget testimony, and kind of walked away with the proverbial unimpressed look. And so they are gravitating to the bill that the Assembly has passed for a number of years. It's been identified by the Assembly Speaker as one of his 7-point policies that is going to get passed under his majority agenda. He did that back in early January. The majority leader, Andrew Stewart Cousins in the Senate, identified the CCPA as the focal point of their discussions. And I think eventually the governor will come to the table. We'll have a 3-year negotiation on climate legislation, hopefully before the end of June.
So as written...
Definitely this session.
So as written, do you think the CCPA is something that can go into effect? Because there's been a criticism of some of the One House bills that previously made it through the Assembly, died in the Senate, was that they were kind of pie-in-the-sky bills, whether it's like the single-payer bill, that they were written kind of idealistically, might not work in the practical world. Is the CCPA bill ready to go in your estimation, or does it still need some tweaks to work in the real world?
I don't think it needs any tweaks to work in the real world. People may quibble over some drafty language here and there and want to tighten it up here and there, but I think what the Senate has heard consistently as they put this bill out to hearing in the last couple of weeks is that this is entirely doable, that government has a role to set bold, big, out-year standards to drive innovators and entrepreneurs into that space to help us reach those goals.
Any short-term pain in implementing these, whether it's higher business costs, whether it's increased taxes, whether it's just changes to my day-to-day life that are going to inconvenience me? I mean, is there a reason that anybody should be opposed to these, even if they're maybe not long-term smart?
Well, listen, I've worked in New York State politics for more than 30 or almost 30 years. There's always going to be a reason for somebody to be opposed or the naysayers to try to have a very loud megaphone. But I think what's going to happen here is people are going to understand there are huge benefits for acting. There are obviously public health benefits. Fewer people will be getting sick and dying prematurely because of the climate change impacts that are happening now. Communities, as we start to address climate pollution, will see fewer extreme weather events. And there will be also the huge benefit of economic development as new industries and new technologies emerge to help us become more energy efficient. Somebody's going to have to help people weatherize their homes. Somebody's going to be making money off of becoming more energy efficient and just deploying more solar and more wind. And there's a race going on globally for the clean energy economy. And if New York doesn't start setting these laws into place, the investments will go elsewhere where they know that there is the surety of law for climate policy.
And is there any indication to suggest that the federal government is going to continue to sort of support these types of investments? You talked about federal dollars that are out there. Is that going to be the case likely moving forward, or could we not have access to federal money in the future potentially?
Well, I think under the current administration, the Trump administration, they're hostile to even acknowledging that climate change is a problem. So they're not going to be thinking about how to help states address their climate goals. I think this is really an issue where states have to lead. And I think we're at this moment in time where it's incumbent upon New York to really step up once again in the leadership way that we've done in the past. In the 80s, we pointed out the problem of acid rain in the Adirondacks. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't sit around and wait for the federal government to act. We installed our own laws here to reduce acid rain emissions from power plants. And then that gave us greater moral authority to fight at the federal level. We've done it on electric cars. We did it on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which captures carbon pollution and reduces it over time. So New York State has this long-standing history of being a leader. We have ceded that leadership mantle to other states when it comes to climate, but there's nothing that says that the race is over and we can't once again capture that leadership space.
Well, Peter, I appreciate you taking the time and walking me through this, and I guess we'll be watching to see if the final budget includes this statutory language that could be a real game changer for New York.
Yeah, it could be in the budget, not, but certainly New York State is poised to finally act on climate and have a climate law before the end of the session.
Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And that's our show. My thanks to Peter for educating me on energy and environmental policy, which I generally find to be an overwhelming topic that I try to avoid. One update since our recording, I applied and got approved for a free home energy audit. Now I'm just trying to line up a contractor to do the inspection. If you enjoyed this episode, please spread the word on social media or leave us a review wherever you download podcasts. Until next time, podcast adjourned. Iwanowicz?
Correct.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.